So how do you get your data to and from Savio? So one of the easiest ways or simplest ways is with SCP or FTP. We're just going to go over SCP because it's more straightforward. SFTP, there's lots of guides that you can look up on how to use it, but it works fine with Savio. The syntax for the SCP command and using it with Savio is just your basic SCP commands, but make sure that you're going to be targeting that to the DTN rather than one of the login nodes. So make sure I have this bayarea.csv file. Good. Okay, so I have this bayarea.csv file in my home directory on my laptop. And here I'm going to transfer that file to my account at the DTN. Remember that this tilde symbolizes my home directory, / and dot. So I'm saying name it the same thing, just put it in my home directory. And again, one-time passwords. Oop. Okay, so that transfer's happening now. If you want to change its name rather than a dot, you can just give it a new name, like right here. Or you can go ahead and put a full path, such as putting it in the Scratch directory. That's actually other Chris's Scratch directory. I forgot to change that one. And then you can also pull files from Savio to your local machine just by reversing this order, right? From Savio, this file, to my home. Okay. One of the problems with SCP, or one of its inconveniences, is that you can only do one file at a time. And so if you have a directory with thousands of files in it, that obviously is impractical. So you can use tar, which is a tape archive program on Savio, to bundle up and compress files for offloading prior to the SCP command. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that because it's going very slow in this room. But I will. Let's see, and do I have like a data somewhere? Where did I put it? Ah, there it is. Okay, so I've got this data directory, and I can move some junk into it, like that bayarea.csv, into the data directory. I can also move this random test directory into data. Oh. Okay. So now I've got some junk in this directory, and I can use the tar command, like so, to create an archive. V is for verbose, Z is for zip, so compress it when you create it. And then F means to a file rather than to a tape archive. That I want it to be named my archive.tgz, and it's going to be that data directory. And so it tells me, oh, I'm compressing all these things and sticking them in this archive. And then to untar it later, it's almost the same command except an X for extract rather than create. Okay, so that is simple and it works, but it can be a slight pain. So if you're moving large amounts of data, we highly recommend this service called Globus. And Globus can rapidly transfer files using a more point-and-click method, and it also will restart transfers if they fail. It'll let you know the status of them, and it will checksum the data on either side to make sure that it got across without any loss. So I'm going to direct you to our documentation on how to set up your Globus account. But to transfer data to or from another device like your laptop, you're going to need to install this software Globus Personal, or Globus Connect Personal. And then you're going to need to set up your computer as what's called an endpoint in Globus. We've already set up Savio as an endpoint, so you can locate it through the Globus app. Okay, so the Globus app is this web app. And this is kind of what usually when you, well, maybe I'll log out first. Okay. Oh, they remembered my stuff. Oh, there it went. Okay, so you log in with your CalNet. Which you've all set up with the two-factor authentication, because we're very secure here. Okay, and you'll be brought to the transfer screen at first. For some reason, it only gives you a single panel, which I don't find very useful. So usually, go ahead and put it to 2 panels. And you want to look for a collection or endpoint here. And Savio's is going to be UCB #BRC. So that's it there. And that's Savio. And oh, I'm already logged in here too. That's weird. Okay, usually when you do this endpoint, it's then going to ask you to authenticate access to your data on Savio. So you'll click through there and you'll enter in your Savio username as well as your PIN and one-time password as if you were logging in with SSH to Savio. And once you do that, then you'll be able to see your data. Now, the other end that I want to connect to is my laptop. So go ahead and open up a new terminal here. And this is going to be Globus. I have the Globus Connect Personal software on my laptop. And I want to run Globus Connect, which I have previously set up. The setup for that is pretty easy. You, within the Globus app, you will go to your endpoints, create a new endpoint, Globus Connect Personal, give it a name right here. You will generate a key, copy that key, and then the first time you run Globus Connect Personal, it'll ask you for the key. You enter it in there. So I've done that. I connect. And in a moment, back in my file manager, I will be able to select my laptop's endpoint, which I've named Askaspore. All right, it's connected, and now it's active. And so I can go and find this bayarea.csv file and go ahead and transfer that over to Savio. Transfer requested, and I can view the details here. Seeing how many files, what point is it at, what's its status, etc. And just a side note, there's also a Globus command line interface. And if you want to read the documentation of that, you can use that to automate some of your transfers. For example, after you're done with an analysis, automatically transfer the results to your storage offsite somewhere. OK. The last data transfer method we want to go over is using rclone with, in this case, Box, but it's very similar for bDrive. So as Cal affiliates, you have access to unlimited storage on Box and bDrive, which can be very handy for moderately large amounts of data. Box does have a 15 gigabyte cap on the file size, and both of them do have limits on how much data you can transfer per day. If you aren't familiar with those, you can check out, they both have web apps and desktop apps to kind of sync files between your machine and the drive. And Globus, unfortunately, doesn't work for those because we can't set up endpoints for your own private, like bDrive. But there is some software such as rclone, which is specifically developed to complete these kinds of tasks. So setting up rclone with Savio does require a little bit of setup. So, and we already have it installed on Savio. So here I'm logged into Savio. No rclone. I think you need to load it. Globus. OK, so you do need to load the module, but then rclone is there and available for you. I want to go. Yeah. To set that up on Savio, you'll do this rclone config. And then on Savio, you're going to not do autoconfig. So a new remote. We're going to name this training box. And then select from the list. It's going to be box. OK. OK, I think you leave this blank. Oh, wrong one. That blank. OK, now it asks you if you want to do autoconfig. You say no there. Then you actually have to go back to your own laptop. So this is on Savio. But this is a remote machine, and so you have to actually have rclone installed on your machine at home. And you do rclone authorize box. This is going to open up a browser. This is why you have to do it on your own machine, because you can't use a browser on Savio, at least not easily. And you will log in here with your CalNet ID to log into Box. When you do that, back in your terminal, it'll give you a code. You copy and paste that into the result here, and then you're done. Once you've done that, there are some commands like rclone list remotes. They're pretty self-explanatory. And you can see that I have a box account already set up for my lab association. And then you can list directories and files, copy files using those rclone commands. OK, once you get some files on there and you need to edit them, you're going to need some kind of text editor. On Savio, we have 3 text editors available. Vim and Emacs are both available by default. And you've already seen Emacs. If you want to use Nano, you have to load that module. And now there's Nano. OK. So I've been loading a few modules, and you may be wondering what's all that about. Software in Savio is stored in this module system. And that's not designed to be confusing, but it does enable us to have many different versions of software that don't conflict with each other, so that each user can configure their environment so that it works for them without getting in the way of other users. The commands for this are just simply module, and as well as the module load command, which you've seen me do. How do you know what software is available? You can do that with module list, which lets me know what modules are currently loaded. You can see that Vim and Emacs are already loaded whenever I log in. And I've since loaded rclone and Nano. And you can list all available modules with this kind of truncated available command. So there you can see all of the software modules that are available. One thing that trips people up is that some of the software is nested hierarchically, because software has different dependencies. So if you haven't loaded one of those dependencies, it won't show up in the available command, unfortunately. So when you're looking to see if something's available on Savio, you may want to start with loading some of the prerequisites, especially some of the common ones, like OpenMPI or the GCC or the Intel compiler if you're using that. So this OpenMPI should fail. So you go, oh no, there's not OpenMPI. But if I load the GCC first, that worked. That also prevents you from loading a version of the software that was built with a different version than you have loaded of some prerequisite. So it enforces that the dependencies are compatible with each other to some extent. OK, all right, that's what I have to say about getting onto Savio and getting your data there. Chris Petrork is going to take over with actually running some jobs on Savio. Any questions before I go? Yes? So the scratch space is theoretically unbounded. There's no user limitations, as you may have noticed. There's not a current schedule, but it is prone to occasional clearing. So if it's getting full, we may come through and delete a bunch of old files. So you really should not use it for long-term storage of your data. It's not stable, it's not backed up, and your data could be cleared. That is done, I believe, on data that is 6 months old or longer.
Yeah, we're still sort of coming up with a formal policy on when exactly and how to do that. So it's been a bit of a sort of manual process.
Yeah, so I can't give you like an every 2 weeks data gets cleared. But if your data is less than 6 months old, you should be safe. Yeah.
One question about the error message I often get with rclone. If I just type rclone ls my class, for example, it gives an error message. Error message in this files get just the API box, api.box. Are you familiar with that?
Listening files. I think we'd be happy to take a look at that. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. And yeah, but I think at the end we're going to go over some ways you can get more help and some of our resources that are available to you. So that would be a great question for those kinds of things.
Is it a way to easily transfer from your Scratch space to the group space, or do you have to transfer to your laptop and then through Savio again to the group space?
No, yeah, you can transfer between the different file systems on Savio as you would between different locations on your normal computer. Yeah.
So you could just use the CP command, for example.
Yep.
Direct.
Yeah, MV or CP work just fine. All right, thanks.